More crazy Habs prospect news as Aatos Koivu scores his first goal in the league off an absolutely filthy snipe. He's now up to 3 points in 9 games, really setting a tone for himself. We gotta get into that. But Jesse, we also gotta talk about the Athletics' recent rankings of top players under 23 in the NHL, and there's a few Habs that people think are much too low. And finally, a recent article from Arber highlights how the future for Lane Hutson on defense may not be at the position that you expect. We got to get into all that coming up on this episode of Habs Digest, and we'll start with Lane. And this is a pretty big development. Now, we saw this, Jesse. I know we mentioned it in the last video talking about the recent game that Hutson was in, but well, he's not just playing left side recently. He's been playing a bit of the right side. He's been getting some reps over there, and Arpin highlighted this, and there's some very interesting stuff I want to get into. He said between the second and third period, Martin St. Louis did something that shows the extent as to which Hutson is firmly in the mix. They started playing him a bit on the right side, pairing him with Arber Xhekaj. They want to evaluate Hutson on the right side in this environment, facing a lineup that's very close to what the Leafs will start the season with. He goes on to say, you can pause and read this if you want. The article will also be linked down below, but he mainly says at the end, there's more holes open on the right than there is on the left. And if you want Guhle to be back on the left, and if Hutson shows he can play the right side, that could be an interesting pairing going forward. Basically ending it by saying at this point, it'd be shocking if Hutson's not in the opening night lineup. Jesse, what do you make of Lane Hutson on the right side experiment? Do you expect to see this in games coming forward? Because to me, this is a huge development that I could not have possibly predicted coming into this training camp.
Marty's testing him early on. He's throwing some curveballs his way to see what he can handle. Putting him at right D, playing against an NHL team basically in the Toronto Maple Leafs for a good solid part of that game at the end of the game as well. Playing him with Justin Barron, another offensive guy. They're throwing him into some sort of like situations to see how he reacts. But Lane Hutson, once again, just seems to kind of pass with flying colors and even like a certain amount of ease, you would say as well. I would say going forward, like this guy can absolutely do it all. Played so much, over 25 minutes of ice time, a lot of that played on right D. Like basically going forward though, like you definitely want to nurture certain players. I think as much as possible, they're trying to put them in different situations right now, which is great. But as much as possible, they're definitely going to want to keep them on as a left-handed defenseman. Of course, though, like there is those possibilities like with Guhle because both so smooth skating. I know we could see it. Like Lane's is the kind of guy that for sure he could make it work, but I think early on in his career with everything that's going on, we know he has hyper awareness there on the ice. But I think definitely playing him to his strength and not just that, but playing him with a veteran, no offense to Cayden Guhle, but with a Savard type of player, obviously, is super beneficial to him in his career. But like, we have to face the fact, like, he's already one of the best players on the Montreal Canadiens. So Martin St. Louis is going to nurture that player and really put him in the best place for him to continue his progression.
And I think that's the best thing. But, at the same time, it's like, yeah, left side makes more sense for him, but sometimes people with opposite hand shots do just thrive on the opposite side. Now, of course, there's certain disadvantages for playing on your offside. Like, some forwards might like to play on the offside of their shot for, maybe they like the shooting angles more, or they just play better, whatever. There's a bunch of different things, but testing them there is never going to do you some harm, and it might not be the long-term first pairing, Guhle and Hutson, but I mean, it's starting to get into the head. Let us know down below what you think. Is Lane Hutson, like, could this be a real possibility? Filling him in on the right side moving forward? Maybe we're talking about filling in the right side with some stopgap after Savard is gone as we wait for Mailloux and Reinbacher. It's like, maybe that guy just might be Lane Hutson. But I want to move on to something else, Jesse, and I want to talk about some other prospects, because recently, The Athletic did a ranking. It was kind of a ranking from a bunch of people putting their opinions in, ranking players in certain tiers of all players under 23. And, well, tier 1 is the MVP tier, and that is just Connor Bedard and no one else. It's like, okay, fair enough. Tier 2 is the franchise player. You're like, all right, where's Demita? Well, he's not there. So, Jesse, to start off this list, I'm going to bring this up here. This is written by Scott Wheeler, but, of course, has input from a lot of people. Tier 3 is All-Star. So in franchise tier, you don't see Demita, but also they're still good. It's a top 60 player, someone who wouldn't be the best player on a contender, but will be an important part of any contending or championship core, a strong top-line forward, above average number 1 defenseman. This is still very high. And Ivan Demidov is right there at 3A, right next to Ziv Boyam, Artem Levshunov, right below the franchise player tier. And yes, Matvei Michkov was in the franchise player tier. But one other guy who was in 3A was Quinton Byfield, yet in 3C, even though he's 2 years younger and had a very similar jump in production from his age 18 to 19 season, as Byfield had in his 21 to 22 season, is Juraj Slafkovsky. So I know it's still pretty high praise, saying this guy's like a top line player on a contender. Still very good, Jesse, but when I'm looking at these rankings, I can't help but wish Slav was maybe even up in 3B and Demidov was up in the franchise tier, because I really feel like he belongs up there with some of the other names.
Two really good players, and ones that you win with, that's what really counts. But for sure, Demidov is in that slightly different category. Ivan Demidov is a franchise player. He's somebody that you build your team around completely, not just because of the offensive skill, but what he can definitely bring defensively as well. We know that Slav is going to have an amazing career, and I love him. I think they're both players that bring important things that you really need on your team. But I think sometimes just having, like, obviously a point per game plus, an emphasis on the plus when talking about Demidov, is definitely just kind of takes your game and your team to another level. That being said, it's like there are very good players on this list. And in Scott Wheeler's defense, he did have him in the franchise rank. Ivan Demidov himself is just, it is like with consultation of other analysts, other scouts, they try to make it consensus. And there is lots of good players on this list. For sure, it takes time to really analyze for it to come through. But one thing we know about Ivan Demidov, which I think stands out from, we don't want to throw shade, but like maybe the Mitchkovs, maybe the Stutzlas, is that 200-foot game of really bringing it defensively as well. I think that Demidov is just going to really shine. We see Stutzla, he was on a little bit of a down year last year, 70 points, 18 goals, 52 assists. Like, he's gone to that 90-point mark, but like, I feel like Demidov can do that and even much more as well. So again, a lot to like with just the work ethic there, but we're going to be up on our boys.
Let's also not sleep on the fact that there's a world where Demidov ends up playing center at the next level. And a big reason that he's not in that franchise tier is because scouts favored the centers. And that's fair as well. We haven't seen those reps yet, but if he projects to be a center, I think you'd bump him up a little bit. I'm going to put Slav on the screen, but I did also want to highlight before we move on to the next section that Cayden, Guhle, David Reinbacher, and Lane Hutson were also featured in tier 4, which is star, not quite all-star tier, but like that tier, those are all defensemen. That tier is below average number 1 defenseman. So to have Hutson there, it's like, okay, I mean, like, some people are much lower on Hutson, some are much higher, which I guess makes sense for that middle of the pack ranking, but Hutson, Reinbacher, and Guhle is a name that, like, you kind of forget in these under 23 lists. To have him in that tier as being a slightly below average number 1 defenseman is really cool. But let us know your thoughts on all that down below, because we got to get into some other great stuff in this video before it's out. There's some great stuff. Check out the whole ranking. There's a lot of Habs players mentioned. But final thing, Jesse, we got to talk about more prospects. And it's Aatos. I love Aatos Koivu. I think he genuinely has so much skill, and I feel like he's getting slept on to some extent. And as people are saying, some people thought the Habs reached to get him because of the Koivu connection. I don't even think that's the case. And while, yes, he's only at, only 3 points in 9 games in a professional league just after getting drafted, which is still very good. Jesse, his shot is one thing we've mentioned before the draft. It's one thing we've mentioned after, and he put it on full display in his first goal. He was playing a bit of first line as well, but look at this absolute beauty of a snipe. Yes, he's right-hand shot. Takes me a while to get used to that, but look at the slow motion of this. Absolute top cheddar. No mistake made there. Jesse, what are your thoughts on Aatos Koivu? Now, I know we talk a lot about Demidov. We talk about Konyushka. We talk about guys all over the place. Kapanen recently, now that he's in North America. But Aatos, I mean, he had a point in his first Liga game. He's out here now scoring, honestly, a beautiful snipe of a goal. I don't know. Maybe it's too easy to get too hyped on so many prospects, but he's been showing some tools that I think is way better than most people would have expected.
It's good drafting. And what I think is that we got an NHL player here. Like, yes, it's going to take a couple years for sure. He needs to season up, in the weight department and everything else like that. But he knows what his specialties are, and he really leans into them. And I think that that's what's going to allow him to succeed. He's getting to a strong start. We not only see that toe drag to snipe there, he's ready to shoot, by the way. And you got to love that willingness from a young player to really kind of assert himself in the game. But like, for being a little bit smaller, Josh, what I'm liking and what's making me more hopeful about his NHL career is his ability to kind of mix it up. Like, we've seen some videos kind of coming out where he's getting in some scrums a little bit. And again, we don't expect this from this little bit that smaller player, but the fact of working hard, having a solid work ethic, and then that skill to go with it, that's what takes you to the next level. If you have that skill, it's good enough to get drafted, right? But it's often that hard work, that dedication to your craft every single day that kind of takes you to the next level that it seems like Aatos has. Of course, he's got a lot of solid people in his corner that he's learned from. So we're seeing that definitely to his benefit right now.
Yeah, 100%. Again, his father knows what it takes to win, knows what it takes to, make the Montreal Canadiens and succeed in an organization like this. So to see him putting in this work, like you said, Jesse, you put it very well, is like, that's something that a lot of Habs prospects have done. We've seen him with that kind of off-season workout stuff. We've seen him, like you said, get creative in games, but also like mix it up with some bigger guys and just try and do a bit of it all and just show like, man, I want to be here. I want to make my name known. And that's one of those qualities that definitely turns you into, well, a fan favorite, but also a coach's favorite. So it's really cool to see this from Aatos. Just going to play that goal one more time for you all fine folks, just so you can have a little look at liga.fi on Instagram is where we found this original post. But let us know what your thoughts are on Aatos Koivu and all this other rookie prospect news down below. We'd love to hear from you because that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. You guys have been supporting like crazy. We really, really appreciate it. I'm Josh Gosse, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.